happen, because one of the things that he said just about every time he's joined us, it will happen again, so you need to be prepared. He is Sam Rosenberg. He is from INPAX. That's INPAX. You can find him on my Facebook page. You can directly link him with them. Or, of course, you can Google search and you will find him. Sam, it has happened again. And I don't think it's a stretch to say, look, if you haven't figured it out now, you better. It's really time for us to stand up and look in the mirror and say, we have got to protect our loved ones and ourselves. We can't expect the world to do it because, as we all know, especially from recent headlines, the world has got its hands full with enough aggravation and violence. Good evening.
Good evening, Rob. Good to talk to you. As you know, the founding quote of our entire philosophy and our basis of all of our training is that it's good to have a lifeguard, but ultimately you should know how to swim. And this is a perfect example of this. It's an appalling situation, but what makes it even worse, and to me, what is almost not just a disservice, but a dishonoring of the victims, is how we're all reacting to this situation instead of naming the enemy for what it is and coming together, as a group, as a society, and saying, let's look at this and see how we can respond to this and how we can legitimately manage this crisis and this situation of terrorism and mass homicide. All we do is turn on each other. It's a horrific situation that we're dealing with.
Listen, I don't know many countries or places in the world that have figured out how to fight this better than Israel. And I know you've got connections there. I just want to ask, and maybe you heard my monologue kind of going into the bottom of the hour. I think it's long overdue. We need to find out what recipe for success they've used, and whatever it takes, I think we have to just let our ego and check it at the door and say, we need help. We can't do this alone because it's not working. But before we talk about what individuals can do and what you do and what your thoughts are, why is it you think Israel has been able to figure out how to fight such acts as this? And yeah, they do happen, but they don't happen as frequently as they do other parts of the world. And the way things have been happening in this country, we have become more of the headline as far as the attackers attacking us, as opposed to us stopping attacks like this.
Well, the first thing we want to understand, Rob, is that Israel is on the front lines for the entire Western world. So, when people look at Israel and they condemn Israel for policies, with regard to the Palestinians or whatever, without really understanding what's going on over there or the psychology of the folks involved or the realities, it's a damn shame. But the reality is this: Israel is on the front line. They are the tip of the spear dealing with the terrorist problem and dealing with this radical Islamic issue for the entire Western world. And, they are faced with more terrorist acts than any other country probably that I know of. I believe it is more terrorist acts, per year than any other country in the world. But the reality is that the reason why they're successful in managing it and responding to it is because of the psychology of the Israeli people. They truly do understand that personal security is an individual responsibility. They don't look to the lifeguards. They don't look to the protectors of society and just hope and pray. They understand that it's an inherent individual responsibility, and they work together to contribute to security. It's interesting, Rob, if I can share a funny story. It's not funny. It's actually an interesting story. There's a little-known phenomena with wolves in the wild.
Okay.
That when a wolf gets amongst domesticated sheep, they will literally kill and maim all of the sheep that they can as fast as they can until they either run out of targets or literally get chased off, okay? They get stopped. And it only happens when they're dealing with domesticated sheep. You see, in the wild, the prey animals have horns. They have defense mechanisms like speed or heightened senses. And most of the time what happens is in herd animals, they group together and protect the young and protect the vulnerable by putting out horns like a phalanx to face off against the predators. And it makes it very, very difficult for predators to actually succeed in an attack because it makes it a very hard target. But domesticated sheep are totally different. not only are they vulnerable to an extreme, they've been bred into vulnerability and helplessness, but they actually compound the problem, because as soon as the wolf gets amongst them, they go into an absolute abject panic state, literally will run off cliffs, crush each other against walls, and trample their own young instead of doing anything productive to actually protect themselves. This dynamic of this kind of what is classically called surplus killing with these wolves, and this sheep wreck that they call it, sort of colloquially, of how the sheep behave, is a strange phenomena, but it contributes to people believing that wolves are like these evil, bloodthirsty creatures. But the wolf is just being a wolf. The problem that we have is that I think this is a perfect analogy. This is totally synonymous to what we're talking about. We have literally conditioned people into this belief that they are helpless in the face of violence. And we've domesticated ourselves to the point where we no longer even come together as a group, as a society, and say, we may disagree on certain things, but together we are going to look at solutions and protect each other. And recognize that the wolf is at the door and the wolf is the problem, not ourselves. But what we want to do is we constantly want to do more. We want to take the teeth away from the sheepdog of society. Well, one sheepdog can protect a flock from a whole pack of wolves, even though it's completely outnumbered. The odds are against it, because the deterrence factor of one responder willing to rise to the challenge is sufficient to deter those wolves and to represent enough of a threat to them.
Listen,
it's an incredible analogy.
I want to be able to share the knowledge of Sam Rosenberg, so he has been so nice to join us tonight, and we're going to keep him for 2 segments. So if you have a question for Sam, some thoughts about what happened there, or maybe some thoughts on how you can be safer in your world, feel free to call us right now. We'd love to hear from you. 866-391-1020. Dollar Bank Instant Access, KDKA.com. They're open at 7 a.m. tomorrow until 7 p.m. The number is 888-433-2040. They're in Swickley, Pennsylvania. Their website is livewithconfidence.com. Sam, one thing as we go to break, and then when we come back, we'll kind of break it down as far as what people can do, because let's face it, I'm sure no one thought in Orlando, even with all of the headlines, and especially what was happened even in France recently, that it would have ever happened there. I mean, in one of the biggest tourism cities in the world, but it did happen, so people need to understand that no one really is safe today. But the thing that I admire about you, yes, if you want to have a weapon and you want to do it the right way, get the proper permits, that's fine. Learn how to shoot it to be safe, it's good. But what you teach people, even in this random act of violence that we're dealing with in our world today, if they are not carrying, you teach them how to focus. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is focus. That really is a key in a situation like this, isn't it?
Absolutely. Situational awareness is where it always starts.
All right, we'll come back. One of the questions already waiting for Sam is, how can we be safe? I think you folks are going to have as good, if not better, questions than I am, so I'm going to try to get as many calls on the air as possible. Sam, I do have to ask you this. Are you even shocked by these headlines anymore?
No.
Shelley Duffy said something earlier to me today that really kind of hit home. And I thought to myself, I have thought this, but I never have said it, and I'm glad she did. It's almost as though we have become numb to this, where it's almost such a part of our everyday life that it's just like another headline, if you will. Do you think we have settled for this to the point where that is the biggest tragedy, obviously, other than these poor people dying the way they did, but our country maybe, and us, meaning citizens, have just gotten so complacent that we have become, if you will, those sheep?
I think we have, Rob. I mean, to be honest with you, I could barely sleep, the night of the Sunday night. When I heard what happened Saturday on Sunday, it troubled me so much I could barely sleep Sunday. I was thinking, for 24 hours about how can I talk to people about this, and how can I, urge people to do the right thing in this regard when the dialogue was spinning off in such inappropriate and unhelpful directions. And I don't know that we're numb to it. We're definitely numb to the routine type of violence that we're seeing. These massive attacks are a big problem. And to be honest with you, Rob, the media sensationalizing it and focusing on it in the way that they do only adds to the problem. They're like the happy co-conspirators to the issue, because what happens is the next mass killers that are lurking in the shadows are watching this and saying, that's the notoriety that I want to achieve. And that's at their core.
Well, the thing that I want to leave this segment with, and it's probably going to be the only time I'm going to bring it up tonight, but I mean this. And, you know, right away, the whole aspect of it being a gay club was brought up, and a lot of people discussing it. Let me just say this. These are loved ones. These are people's children, significant others. These are human beings. That word should not even cross your mind. As a matter of fact, when I first reported the story, I didn't even use that word because it was really not significant to the story at all, as far as I'm concerned. These are, well, children of God. These are people of God. These are good people, and they are human beings. And what happened to them was a horrible tragedy. We'll come back. Your phone calls for Sam Rosenberg. He is from Impacts. It's livewithconfidence.com. Back with more in a moment. Sam Rosenberg from Impacts, talking self-defense and self-preservation in these violent times that we live in, the aftermath of Orlando. LiveWithConfidence.com. 9 o'clock, CBS News with more on this developing story. One of the things they're saying is that Omar Mateen's wife knew ahead of time. She says that's not the case. He talked about jihadist attacks, but never talked about a particular incident. Lots of things developing with that story. We'll have the latest from CBS Radio, top of the hour. Then we're going to shift gears and talk about something very happy, and it is that Shell petrochemical plant that's going to bring thousands of jobs and put billions of dollars in our economy, but not the immediate impact. I'm looking at long-term, so I figured I'd go get two of the best, Brian Coble and Mauricio Viad from Heffron Tillotson. We'll also share some comments from Jim Meredith and what he had to say to me on his show, Heffron Tillotson's Your Money and You on Sunday, and it really is good news long-term. And then in the 10 o'clock hour, it's Dean Martin, the big festival. He would have been 99 on June the 7th. They've got the festival coming to his hometown of Steubenville on June 16th and running over the weekend. And joining me will be the mayor, Dominic Musey. Plus, we're going to get back to open talk throughout the evening on this story and other stories developing on this Flag Day. Let's go now to Phyllis in Pittsburgh for Sam Rosenberg from Impacts. Go ahead, Phyllis.
Thank you very much. The more I hear about this tragedy, the angrier I get. I grew up in the housing projects, and after 20 years came back to live here. I had never heard a semi-automatic weapon before in my life. That all the things that have happened, income, high murder rate, I have never heard it until just a couple of years ago, and it's horrible to hear someone screaming because they're being killed. Number one, we've become a bloodthirsty society. We're the ones that like to drive by and look at the carnage and say, oh, my God, you know, I'm glad it's not me. Well, now it's come to a point where every time there's a public event, there's going to need to be, within that organization who plans this, hundreds of people who are trained to use weapons to keep the rest of us safe. That's absolutely crazy. As I said before, nobody needs a semi-automatic weapon to protect themselves. That is crazy. Either because they don't know who the shooter is, or they're not trained well, and risk killing a lot of innocent people. The third thing I want to say is I'm very upset about the subliminal messages with the videos. Any child from age 5 up can blow somebody's head off with a video, and we seem to become more and more desensitized to that. In other words, it's not happening to us. We don't need to care. And that's all I have to say.
Hey, good call, Phyllis. Thank you. Yeah, and I can attest to my own children how it would be difficult at times, and they would challenge me, but there was just videos that they could not get until they were a certain age. But, Sam, you have a very good point about these automatic weapons and gun control in general. I totally agree with where she's coming from, but in the real world, in reality, that's not going to stop this violence taking away those guns, correct?
Well, here's my opinion on that, okay? I honestly believe, after studying mass homicides and mass killing over the last 18 years, fundamentally, if you were to snap your fingers right now and all of the guns in the United States vanish instantly, you would still have the exact same manifestation of violence because, as Phyllis is bringing up the point, we're not addressing a lot of the underlying causes, and she is absolutely correct on the fact that we are becoming an extremely desensitized society to violence, extremely. The media, level of media violence that kids are exposed to today is absolutely atrocious compared to what it was even just 20 years ago. And the video game connection is an absolute connection. I've talked to people who will absolutely, they will argue this to the day is long, but I will tell you this with my own experience. I remember when I was in the Marines, I was an officer in the Marine Corps, and I remember very early on in the early 90s when they started using first-person shooter games as tools to help desensitize soldiers and Marines from violence and combat. This is something that has been studied extensively. You know, a first-person shooter game back in the early 90s, we're talking about Quake and Doom and some of these first games, they had the impact of having a visceral effect on the nervous system, which means that you could literally have an adrenaline reaction from the input of the screen and the interactivity of the game itself. And that has a profound effect of desensitizing people to violence. So kids being exposed to that and being weaned effectively on first-person shooter violent video games is having a profound effect on the psychology of our generations at this point. There's several two generations now that have been affected by it.
Sam Rosenberg,
absolutely correct on those things.
Sam Rosenberg, Impacts, livewithconfidence.com. Sam, I wish I had more time. We could go throughout the night, and I'm going to make you give us the Cliff Notes version. Just a couple of minutes. Well, obviously, people need to call you and to find out what you do. That's my opinion at Impacts. But just a synopsis, what can people be doing day to day just to put themselves in a much safer condition when they have to go out in the real world?
Understand that fear comes from not knowing what to do about things. You know, we understand that there are things that we can do in our daily life that makes us safer, builds confidence in and of itself. Situational awareness is the first one. Get in the habit of looking at your environments. Recognize where your exits are. These are things that can be conditioned. In terms of recognizing danger, it's easy. Look at environments around you. An environment has a purpose. A parking lot has a purpose. A nightclub has a purpose. When you see someone in that environment who is not using the environment for its dedicated purpose, and it triggers a warning bell in your intuition, and the definition of intuition is knowing without knowing why, trust your gut. Understand that is what the TSA wants you to understand when they say if you see something, say something. When no one's telling you what the hell to look for, this is what you're looking for, is that intuitive warning indicator that you are in the presence of danger. Listen to that and trust that and move away from it and let someone know. Situational awareness, recognition of danger is the first thing. Beyond that, my recommendation is always some level of training, because without training, our brain tends to shut down. We go into paralysis or panic. We become very much like those domesticated sheep that don't know how to behave when the wolf is among them. You know, everyone has the ability to protect themselves. Helplessness is a myth. You know, we can learn and we can adapt and we can grow. And most importantly, we can come together stronger as a people.
Sam Rosenberg, Impacts, livewithconfidence.com. Hey, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again real soon.
Thank you all. Good night.